This is the Daily Tech News for Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. We tell you what you need to know, follow up on context of these stories so they're not just floating out there and you're like, what does that even mean? So that we can help each other understand.
Today, Patrick Beja wraps up the AI Summit and more from your emails.
I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Jenn Cutter.
Let's start with what you need to know from the big story. Apple is beginning a 5-year health research study in cooperation with Brigham and Women's Hospital, that's a Harvard-affiliated research hospital, to see how device data affects your health. Not how the data affects your health, but how you can learn what effects are happening with your health from your device data, and also look for connections between different areas of health, like the relationship between sleep and exercise, right? Do you sleep better when you exercise or vice versa, between mood and heart rate, stuff like that. This is the first new health study for Apple in 6 years. If you didn't know, they have 3 ongoing health studies, the Apple Women's Health Study, the Apple Hearing Study, and the Apple Heart and Movement Study. Those were all announced in 2019, and they have more than 420,000 participants. Those studies have led to new features from Apple Health. So if you use the Vitals app, they came out of these studies. The walking steadiness test comes out of this. And the hearing test, probably the most famous of these, that you can do with AirPods and then use them as hearing aids. Participation is voluntary. So you volunteer to share your metrics, your sleep data, your heart data, your respiration, your activity level, more than that. They also will ask you to answer a survey if you participate, questions about your lifestyle and your habits and things like that. If you want to contribute your health data to the study, you need to take action. They're not going to do it. They're not going to prompt you. You go to the Apple Research app. Previous studies were only open to Apple Watch users, but this study is now available for any iPhone user worldwide. If you have AirPods, and you do also have a watch, that you can use those too, but all you need is an iPhone. Participants can choose which types of data they're willing to share. So if you're like, I'm comfortable sharing my heart data, but not my sleep data, you can choose which ones. And you can stop sharing at any time and withdraw entirely from the research study at any time. Apple says no identity information is ever taken from you. I would add that any metrics you contribute could theoretically be used to identify you in some way, but that's not what Apple's trying to do here. And so they're on the same level as any other research study where they're not trying to collect identifying information about you. Jenn, as an Android user, do you feel like, oh, I wish I could participate? Or are you like, oh, no, that's cool. I'm glad they have that, but it's not something I'm into.
I'm actually an Apple user, and I have an older Apple phone, and I did switch to
Why did I think you were an Android user? I'm sorry.
And I do have an Apple Watch, which I had upgraded from a Fitbit about 2 years ago, and I am stunned at the quality difference. Like, I wear it during hockey, I wear it during sleep. The data is excellent. I don't have to pay more for it every month. And the watch is really good at knowing me these days. Like on Wednesdays, I have a really chill shinny with like a women's senior team who go to like the senior Canada games and stuff. I don't exactly work hard. And afterwards, when it tracks my indoor hockey stats, it volunteers like, hey, was your effort level down at a 3? And I was like, yes, it was. And then Sunday nights, I play with some university kids and my effort level is like a 7. And it starts there because it knows that that's how hard I'm working. So I have participated in research studies in the past, and yeah, like basically what they say afterwards is like, yeah, if you want it, we can send it to you, but you will never know which data is yours in the study. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So this seems to be run like a very standard research and should be really interesting.
Will you participate, do you think?
Well, today is the first day I've known about it. So they say it's worldwide. I will have to check out what's there. And yeah, I'm curious. I might throw my stuff in there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see this because with the story about privacy concerns, with the story about, oh, people never do anything unless you motivate them and give them something. This is an example, 420,000 participants in those 3 stories where you're not getting it. You're not getting paid for this. And you are giving up personal information, but enough people say, you know what, I trust the people involved. It's always in partnership with an established medical entity, and I want to help. I think it's kind of a counter narrative to like, nobody will ever do anything unless you give them something.
Well, also specifically women, we are kind of understudied in terms of a lot of this stuff. So I might just volunteer in the, like, I think they should have more data from women and more data from various backgrounds. Because again, racialized stuff is not studied as much as we kind of wish it was. Yeah,
a lot of times people don't feel like they have access to participate in the study, or they're not sought after to participate in those kinds of studies. So that's a really good point. Again, Research App is the thing you need to get if you want to investigate this. Maybe you don't even want to sign up, but you just want to see what it's all about. And again, only for Apple, but any iPhone user. And also, apologies for pegging you as why did I think you were an Android user?
Well, I am switching to Linux for a bunch of my home machines, so it would follow that I would likely be an Android user, but I'm pretty happy in the Apple portable ecosystem.
Got it. Excellent.
DTNS is made possible by you, the listener. Thanks to Ken Hayes, Philip Shane, Paul Boyer, and our new patrons, Andrew and Sierra.
Yay, new
patrons.
Welcome. There's more we need to know today. Let's get to the briefs.
If you are one of the many people with 2 Apple accounts, we have good news. Apple published a support document that gives instructions on moving purchases from one account to another. That includes apps, music, books, TV shows, and movies. To migrate, you'll need the email address, phone number, and passwords for both accounts. 2-factor authentication must also be on both accounts. Whichever account you are signed into iCloud during migration will be the primary account. The account you're migrating purchases from should only be signed in to media and purchases. After the merge, the secondary account may no longer be used for purchases, and the feature is not available in the EU, UK, and India.
Kind of an unexpected feature here that I have a use case for in that I have my mom passed away a couple of years ago. I have her account, and I'd be like, oh, maybe I can move some of her purchased things over.
Yeah, I'm calling my mom after this and be like, hey, good news. I can fix your thing.
Nice. That's great. The latest, but certainly not last court decision in the many cases alleging that training algorithms on copyrighted data violates copyright law, unless you get permission, has been decided. Thomson Reuters had sued a legal startup called Ross Intelligence. Ross tried to license Westlaw legal data from Thomson Reuters, but was denied. So Ross purchased questions and answers that used Westlaw headnotes from a company called Legalese instead. And Ross then used machine learning. So this is not about large language models. This is machine learning to recognize and extract answers for Ross's own legal search engine. And the judge ruled that Legalese data was clearly copying data from Westlaw. It was just in their whole cloth. And the opinions from Ross that were output by its machine learning device or software did not alter them. And so the judge ruled this was basically building a direct competitor to Westlaw and using things that were direct copies and outputting things that were direct copies. And so it said that's not a fair use defense. Now, it's unclear how this may or may not affect cases regarding large language models because those work differently.
Mm-hmm. It was nice to see the judge get this right from my point of view, because they took a lot of steps to do this thing that they were already told, no, don't do this thing.
Yeah. And the fair use defense with large language models is we use the data and train the model, but the model could be in some very rare cases tricked to output that data, but most of the time doesn't. They're trying to say it's a fair use because we are transforming it into all kinds of other outputs. In this case, it looks like, from what I can tell, Ross was not transforming that. And that's why the judge was like, summary judgment, pretty clear you were just copying.
Adobe is launching a new website at firefly.adobe.com where users can use its new image, vector, and video generating models. The video model is in public beta and also available in the Premiere Pro beta app. You do have to pay, though. Firefly Standard costs $9.99 a month, with unlimited access to image and vector generators and enough credits to make 25-second videos. The Pro plan costs $29.99 a month and gives you enough credits for 70 5-second videos a month. A premium tier that can do 500 5-second videos a month is on the way. The plans can be connected to Creative Cloud to get image and vector generation in Adobe apps.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is Adobe makes sure that its training data is licensed, that they have permission to train on all of its data. So if that's a concern for you, that is an advantage there. There's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the activities of the U.S. Department of Government Efficiency, so much so I had to do a whole segment last week explaining why I was covering some things about it and wasn't covering others. One issue for me is finding reliable information or analysis about what's actually happening, because there's a lot of confusion. So I was pleased to see an article analyzing the department's activities published in Foreign Policy, written by Bruce Schneier and Davi Ottenheimer. Schneier is one of the people I trust most on security issues. He's a former CTO at IBM. He literally wrote the book on applied cryptography and has been covering security since 1991. He's very good at knowing it and explaining it. Now, I know less about Ottenheimer, but he has 25 years of experience leading security teams, currently works for Tim Berners-Lee's Inrupt. This is a long way of saying, I trust what these two say more than the average writer, so I encourage you to read the article, but here are my takeaways from it until you get a chance to do so. They are concerned about the inexperience of the teams and worried that there may be a weakening of security and government systems. There's a lot of fears, and they even express fears of what could happen, but these are the things that are happening that they're worried about. They're concerned that standard safety measures, for instance, requiring 2 people to approve changes, have been bypassed, that unsecured servers were attached to networks without verifying they were secure, and they worried that these systems might now be vulnerable to adversaries. They write, foreign national intelligence organizations will be quick to take advantage of both the chaos and the new insecurities to steal U.S. data and install backdoors to allow for future access. They not only complain about what is happening, but they also provide a solution. They recommend 3 steps. 1 would be to restore the proper authentication and security testing protocols. 2, restore system monitoring and change management. And 3, audit all the changes that have been made to see what effect they had and make sure that there are no remaining vulnerabilities. And that all seems reasonable to me.
Yep. I almost took a job like 15 years ago that would have done some work for CSIS, which is our intelligence agency. And I would have needed some clearance, like our equivalent of secret. I had to fill out stuff on my entire life that I didn't even know. It took me forever to put this together, and it was going to take them a minimum of 6 months to vet everything and then get my clearance. So yeah, to watch all this stuff happen really fast is a little scary from my point of view.
Yeah. And one of the things I've been concerned with is people saying this happened when they heard a friend of a friend say it happened. It's like, okay, what actually happened and what didn't? Schneier's very good about not speculating on things he doesn't have very good confidence. He knows, like, yeah, they actually plugged that server in. So that's one of the reasons I was like, okay, this is a good article to take a look at.
Android headlines published leaked images of the forthcoming Pixel 9a that almost eliminate the camera bump. This may mean a downgrade in the camera from 64 megapixels to 48 megapixels. It also appears to have the largest battery yet in a Pixel phone at 5,100 milliamp hours. In related news, all Pixel cameras got an update, so you don't have to turn on Video Boost every time you open up the camera app. Video Boost improves lighting, colors, and details.
The Central African Republic, that is a landlocked country in the middle of the continent of Africa, has launched its second cryptocurrency in an effort to attract investors. The CAR is one of 2 countries that actually use cryptocurrency as a national currency, the other being El Salvador, although that experiment seems to be fading a little bit there. CAR launched its Songo coin in 2022, and with that coin, you got citizenship, land, and a few other perks. It has now launched CAR Meme on the Solana blockchain. Meme coins are launched from an internet meme or some other humorous origin. The most famous meme coin is the Dogecoin, and they are often quite volatile.
You know, when you're scrolling news late at night and you're wondering, is this real? I need to check some sources on this. And yeah, that was fun to see and will be interesting to track over time. Never mind the short volatility of it. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman says Apple still plans to announce a new iPhone SE, and it may happen next week. He also wrote on X, "For Friday, Apple Vision Pro reps are reaching out to press about an announcement to come. M4 MacBook Air within weeks." Meanwhile, French electronics retailer Boulanger published a product listing for a new iPhone SE model coming soon. The listing contains no other details.
I'll be very curious what ends up happening with that Apple Vision Pro press announcement. It could be software related and not that revolutionary, but if there's some actual new hardware news or maybe minor upgrades to the hardware, something like that, that would be interesting. If you see a sudden burst in profits from Meta later this year, keep this Bloomberg story in mind. First, you need a very surface understanding of the accounting principle known as depreciation. We're not going to go to class here. I'm going to keep this simple, and I apologize to actual accountants who understand this, but the oversimplified version is that you can take the expected life of an expensive piece of equipment and spread out the cost over the life of its use. I actually do that. When I buy a laptop for the company, I spread out the cost over the course of its expected life. That way, you're accounting for the decline of its value as it gets older. Meta is extending the estimated life of its servers and networking assets by 1 year. But since Meta has a lot of servers and networking assets, that's expected to reduce expenses and thus boost profitability by $2.9 billion this year.
Finally, Google announced that Google I/O will take place starting Tuesday, May 20th. The developers conference will kick off with the keynote from CEO Sundar Pichai at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, and I/O is always good for a few forward-looking announcements that we'll refer to. Like, this is the thing they announced at I/O. Notebook LM was one where when it launched, we're like, that's the thing that we're talking about at I/O. So it's always good to pay attention to that. Those are the essentials for today. Let's dive a little deeper in the ongoing stories and follow up on one.
The AI summit this week in Paris started with a lot of announcements by French President Macron about funding and nuclear power for data centers. It ended with EC President Ursula von der Leyen promising a responsible easing of regulations for Europe. Tom sat down with tech podcaster and French citizen Patrick Beja to get an overall look at how the summit was received there.
Patrick Beja, thank you so much for joining me, man.
I'm so happy to be here. Too rare. We should do this more often. Every day.
Let's do it. Absolutely. So how much did the actual public in France pay attention to this? Like, I know it was big tech news, but how much did the average person on the street pay attention?
I think if you only rely on tech news, it wouldn't have been that big a deal, but it was made a big deal by the government. There was a communications push. Macron, the president, was at the 8 o'clock news, co-interviewed by France and India, and there was a lot of, I would even go so far as to say, rebranding of AI as an actual intentional communication strategy. Because until now, as you've discussed in the US many times, the EU is very much oriented towards regulation and kind of the dangers of AI a little bit. This was, look at what AI can do. Like in medicine, it's so awesome. And it can do this and that it can help people walk and it can develop new medicine and all of that. And the general news push was very, very clear. So I think most people are talking about it at the, water cooler. In the past few days, they've been doing that.
What about yourself? When you were watching this, as somebody who does follow this space very closely, what did you make of the summit?
There was a very strange sentiment for me as a French person, looking at the heavy investments and the thought, the idea that we have, this unicorn, this maybe lone unicorn in Europe called Mistral, which is an AI company developing LLMs. There was a very strange sentiment, and I believe that's called patriotism. I'm not sure. Americans know it a lot better. But it was
Sounds right to me.
Oh my God. It was like, maybe we can do it. Like, we have an AI champion. We have actually a huge amount of academic expertise. A lot of AI experts are actually French. I'm maybe some people know, but they go to work at Meta and Google and, in the Silicon Valley. And sometimes they come back. But so we have the know-how. And we have another key element, which is, of course, energy. We have a lot of energy because we went nuclear literally decades ago.
in the good way. Yeah.
in a good way. We have a lot of energy surplus. And that's, it feels like all the key components of what you need to succeed in the AI race are magically assembled in France. And now we have money and investment. So yes, let's do it. We can. So that was
okay. That's interesting to see that it fired you up. I think a lot of people look at that and say, great, yes, you have all of those resources, but you also have impediments, right? Europe has led the way in regulation, and the companies that do AI are basically saying, you are holding us back from helping you achieve more. How do you feel about that kind of line of thinking?
What's a more polite way of saying I call BS? I can't I call shenanigans or whatever.
Sure. Shenanigans is good.
It's really interesting. I think certainly there has been a very strong signal that the EU, France and the EU, is not going to be focusing on regulation as its primary concern anymore. Maybe it's taking a backseat a little bit and we're thinking, okay, we need this, the economy needs this, maybe we should be a little bit more proactive. But the regulation is not going away. It is still a concern. There are some AI things that are a concern, and I'm not going to go into details here, but that should be looked at. And it's not a free-for-all. You should make sure that you do things the proper way in some areas. And it's really interesting because when Apple announced Apple Intelligence, the first thing they said, the third thing they said was, we're so sorry. We can't bring it to the EU. It's so difficult. And like magic, now that it's actually ready and that the languages are ready, guess what? It's coming to the EU. And certainly, there are a few discussions maybe to be had about how you can adapt to the European regulation. But I do think that what Zuckerberg has been saying and things like that are more about probably some difficulties he would rather not have to deal with, and more probably with investments that become necessary and that hit the bottom line a little bit. And it would be easier without those. But we are steadfast in our commitment to finding a middle way between China and the US, and regulation is part of that.
Do you think that puts you at a disadvantage as a market? In other words, China and the U.S. will always be in front?
Obviously it's difficult to say.
Sure.
But honestly, I don't think so. I do believe that there is a way to make those things true at the same time, and to make them benefit the people. It might sound a bit naive to say that, but you need to pay attention to the impact your technology has on society. You need to pay attention to, it's a different field, but moderation is important, and taxes are important. There's the role of the government is to curb the excesses of the free market, which is important. And we dive into politics a little bit, but it applies to AI as well. You can't say, okay, go ahead, do everything, do whatever you want. And you have to find that balance between not impeding innovation too much, but also making sure things are done in a safe and proper way. And hopefully this new commitment to innovation and investment, and this voluntary, enthusiastic movement that we're seeing in France and in the EU will be able to dial back the restrictions that are impediments, if they ever exist, and I'm still not convinced they did, but also find the balance between the two. So I think you can have both. I strongly believe that.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is, sure, it might be frustrating to wait a month for a feature, that came to the US first, but you feel like it's worth the wait to do that because you get a better version of it or a safer version of it or something.
Yeah, and I think safer also means better. I think there is some of that, certainly. There are concerns that are legitimate by the EU and what the AI Act addressed. There are things, like, for example, there were rules. A lot of people in the US talk about these rules without really even reading them. And there are rules like different levels of concerns for different areas of implication of AI. One of the examples would be if it is a critical system, like, I don't know, let's say control of the electricity infrastructure, then you have more constraints and more checks that you need to impose on the technology doing it. And that doesn't seem unreasonable. If you create a social score, for example, through AI with the biases we know AI can have, then you need to be a little bit more careful. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but you have to pay a bit more attention. And also, again, Apple indicated we can't do it because of regulation. I think that was a communications tactic because once it was ready in all the European languages. It's being released now, I believe, this week or next week. I have an old iPhone 12, so I won't be able to use it. But once it's ready, like magic, all of a sudden it's available. So I think they can find ways.
Yeah. Well, Patrick Beja, a large language model can never replace you. Thank you for chatting and helping us understand this. If folks want to follow what you do, where should they go?
I think there are two ways. The Phileas Club is a show where I talk about these big issues and political issues, which I just relaunched in a new format. But there is also a very short form tech podcast I do in French, which is one piece of tech news every day, and it lasts the promise is 3 minutes. I sometimes go to 4. I will confess to that. And both of these are available at notpatrick.com. You'll find all the links for all your podcast apps at notpatrick.com.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thanks.
Big thanks to Patrick for taking the time again. You can join in the conversation. Do you have something to say to me or Patrick or anyone else, including Jenn, maybe even our producer Amos? Whatever you want to say, join our Discord and you can talk right to us. You can link your Patreon account to get access at patreon.com/DTNS.
We end every episode of DTNS with some shared wisdom. Today, Andrew is helping us understand.
Yeah, big thanks to Andrew for sending this along. He wanted to mention a couple of other things to consider about the world EV market. We talked with Bodhi on Monday about that. He mentioned the Osborne effect. The Osborne effect is where a great product declines in sales because people are expecting an improved version. And he thinks this could explain some of the decline in the sales of the Tesla Model Y. That's a great point. He also added that Tesla is the only auto manufacturer right now who does not have to partner with a Chinese company to make and sell cars there. I know I was thinking that when I talked to Bodhi. I can't remember if I actually said it. So if I didn't, thank you, Andrew, for making sure that we got that across. And Andrew pointed out it's not going to be the only one for long. Toyota has recently announced that it will set up a fully owned Lexus factory in China. Andrew, thanks so much for sending that along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In terms of decline for Teslas, there could be other contributing factors. Toronto did its annual budget last night, going late into the night. And one of the surprising motions to me was the fact that it is now going to ban Teslas from city work. That is specifically city work, like city transportation and stuff. And a later motion kind of softened it so that people who work for the city in transportation who already have Teslas can keep going. But no new Teslas are allowed in city work going forward.
Yeah. I mean, that's not going to tank Tesla sales worldwide, right? But you know, it's a little bit of a drop.
It's showing the current feelings in Toronto and possibly Canadian politics.
Do you think Toronto buys a lot of Teslas? Though?
I think it's a lot of like third parties that they use now.
Okay.
In fairness, we also had a very terrible accident last year where a few people were lost because after an accident, passerbys could not get the windows open. They eventually found something to smash a window open because none of the doors worked. And that was kind of a huge thing. So that scared a lot of Torontonians away from the models.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. Thanks, Jen. And big thanks to Patrick Beja and Andrew for contributing to today's show. Thank you for being along for Daily Tech News Show. This show is made possible by our patrons on patreon.com/DTNS. DTNS also has a live version of the show with Sarah Lane, Roger Chang, and myself. You can find DTNS live on YouTube and Twitch or as a podcast. Find out more details, dailytechnewsshow.com. Talk to you tomorrow.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.